Hello, YouTube. Welcome back to the Alliance here on the. I don't know where I was going with that.
We're just going to start over.
I don't know. I'm so bad at these, man. Okay. What's up, YouTube? Welcome back into another episode of the Alliance. I'm Spencer Davis with Saturday Road. That is Derek Peterson with Saturday Out West. Today, we are talking about UCLA and their win total. Derek, I want to start off with this. In a past life, we both did. We both used to cover Oklahoma football. I did it a little bit longer than you did, and therefore was present for one of Dorian Thompson-Robinson's first ever starts as a Division I college football player. It was in 2018. He played in Norman. He went 16 of 26 for 254 yards and one touchdown. You know, it's not bad. No interceptions either. UCLA got murdered by Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray only threw 33 passes in that game. He hit 306 yards and 3 touchdowns. But yeah, Oklahoma overall dominated them 49-21. The game was over pretty much immediately. Things have improved marginally for Dorian Thompson-Robinson since then. He is somehow still in college football 5 years later. He's starting his fifth season here at UCLA. I think that's where we should start this conversation with UCLA and Dorian Thompson-Robinson and just this offense as a whole. What do you make of this unit from Chip Kelly here?
Yeah, I mean, DTR is the place to start when you're talking about UCLA. So they've got a win total with FanDuel of 8.5. I think they can win 10 games. I'm really high on UCLA. I'm a lot higher on UCLA than most people. There's a lot of skepticism about UCLA because of disappointing seasons to begin the Chip Kelly tenure. I would argue that, some of that disappointment can be attributed to defensive shortcomings, which if you want to lay at the feet of the head coach, you can, because it was his call to keep the DC that he did until this year. But I still maintain that Chip Kelly is one of the best offensive minds in college football. And if last season proved anything, it's that Dorian Thompson-Robinson is a very, very good quarterback when he has a strong rushing attack. I'm not gonna say competent because that's disrespectful to past UCLA teams, but when he's a strong rushing attack, Zach Charbonnet individually is the best running back in the Pac-12. And they bring back Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Zach Charbonnet, and DTR, just using PFF numbers, has a career 1,200 dropbacks in his career. He's got 4 years of starting experience. He's going into his 5th year as a starter. There are few quarterbacks in college football, maybe ever, that have had this wealth of knowledge to draw from. There is not a situation that is going to arise in a football game that he hasn't seen before. There's not something that's going to come up on the play call that he hasn't seen before. He's going to be comfortable in the system. He's going to be comfortable with his backfield partner. I think the trio of Chip Kelly, Dorian Thompson-Robinson at quarterback, Zach Charbonnet at running back is enough to set the floor really high with this team. And when you talk about them winning 10 games, which I'm actually writing about this for my website, when you talk about them winning 10 games, the main justification for that belief is twofold. One, it's Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and two, it's the schedule. They play 4 road games this year. They play 8 games at home. Their non-conference is a cupcake walk. It's a walk through a daisy field.
It's the worst non-conference schedule I've ever seen. I couldn't believe it. When I first saw this, okay. It's Bowling Green, Alabama State, and South Alabama.
It's remarkable. And
when I saw that
it comes at a time when they have 4 road games. Like this season, there are 0 excuses for this team not to challenge for a spot in the Pac-12 title. No excuses whatsoever. I really like some of the pieces that they've added from the transfer portal on the defensive side of the ball, being the Murphy twins from North Texas at edge rusher. Sounds like the cornerback that they got from Wyoming is going to play a role for them. I really like the linebacker that they brought in from Hawaii. I think he's one of the best players that transferred to a Pac-12 school this entire offseason. And hopefully he proves that prediction right. Otherwise, I look like an idiot more so than I already do. But I think, you just look, there's been such a gap between offensive and defensive efficiencies And it was really highlighted last year. That team won 8 games and it was held back by a poor defense. They've had a really hard time generating pressure on the quarterback. They've had a really hard time making plays in the backfield. They've changed defensive coordinators. They've changed to an almost entirely new defensive coaching staff. They changed out a bunch of pieces. They're going to have a bunch of new guys playing in new places. I think that should raise sort of the competency level of that defense. I think it should raise just the overall level of play of that defense. I don't think that that's too much to ask of Bill McGovern in his first year as the defensive coordinator. So if you're going to get that kind of level from your defense, then to have the pieces that they have on offense, without minimizing the role that Kyle Phillips and Greg Dulcich played in the pass game, because they were 2 big targets for UCLA, and they were Dorian Thompson-Robinson's favorite targets over the last 2 years. I think that they're going to be able to have a very effective offense in 22 because of Dorian Thompson's ability to hurt defenses both as a passer and as a runner, and Zach Charbonnet's effectiveness. Now you get Chip Kelly's scheme and Chip Kelly's offensive mind, which, as I said, continues to be, he's one of the best offensive minds in football. And if you give him a competent defense, you give him a really good quarterback and a really good running back, I think he's going to be able to make some things happen. And only play 4 road games, with the toughest road game being Oregon. They've got Utah and USC at home, which I think will help. I think their path to 9 victories it's not easy, or their path to 10 victories, is not easy, but I think it's doable. I think it's perfectly doable because they should open the season 5-0.
Well, yeah. So you mentioned the schedule there. The early season schedule is fairly easy, like you said. They should open the year 5-0. And look, the FanDuel line. You keep talking about 10 wins. The FanDuel line's only 8.5. So you only have to get 9 to feel like, okay, this is going over. Now they do have 3 danger games to me. So they would have to win 2 of them or not lose any others to clear that line. The danger games you mentioned, at home against Utah, at Oregon, and at home against USC. Ideally, you win at least one of those, right? I would probably circle the USC game as the most likely, depending on how USC looks at the end of the year. We'll see. But yeah, the schedule is like, I mean, what more could you ask for, right? Like we mentioned the non-conference, the other Pac-12 games on the schedule: at Colorado, at home against Washington, home against Stanford, at Arizona State, home against Arizona, home against Cal. Basically, none of those scare me at all, except for maybe Washington at home, right? Like the Arizona schools.
And really, that's only because we'd have no idea what to expect from Washington. And
that's at home. But like the Arizona schools, I think at least I am completely writing off because of the issues they've had. Maybe Arizona would be able to give them a game. I think Jed Fish has things a little bit more in order there now. But again, that's at home, right? Like the schedule lines up very well. And if you look at the Chip Kelly era, they really probably do need to win 10 games this year, or at least come close. I mean, the first 3 years of the Chip Kelly era were bad enough that he could have justifiably been fired. 3 wins, 4 wins, 3 wins. Then last year they go 8-4. They get up to as high as number 13 in the AP poll. It was a pretty good year, but it's time to make a next step, especially with a 5th-year starting quarterback coming back, which is just an outrageous thought. I mean, how many of those are you ever going to have? Mm-hmm. They need to make another step as opposed to taking a step back.
Yeah, I mean, you ask how many like. Chip Kelly might not have another player in his entire career that understands his offense as well as Dorian Thompson-Robinson should understand his offense next season. And that's worth something. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning, and we can wrap up on this, is like there was kind of like a meh reaction to Chip Kelly getting extended earlier this year. Now Lincoln Riley is at USC, and over the last few months, there's been a bunch of like pitting Chip Kelly against Lincoln Riley. Well, USC is doing this. Why isn't UCLA doing this? Well, USC is doing this. Why can't UCLA do this? It really came to a head during like spring game time where UCLA didn't have an actual spring game. It was on the Pac-12 network. The morning was just a practice because that's when the Pac-12 network asked Chip Kelly to do it. And he made a point of letting everybody know that. And then USC has a full blown game and ESPN is there and Kirk Herbstreit was supposed to be there. And it was like, well, look at how far ahead Lincoln Riley is already than Chip Kelly. As we get closer to the season, I wonder if some of that starts to dissipate and it just becomes the USC show, the Lincoln Riley show. There's going to be so much focus on USC, what they're doing, how they look, how's Lincoln Riley adjusting, how's Caleb Williams look. There's not enough oxygen in that market for two college teams to dominate headlines. Like there could be a situation where UCLA starts 5-0 and not a soul in Los Angeles is talking about them because everybody wants to talk about USC.
They're the Clippers.
Then there's the pro sports. Does that help Chip Kelly? Does that help the team? That'll be sort of an interesting kind of subplot to watch because, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I just read their start, right? I mean, Chip Kelly, if Chip Kelly was, when he got hired at UCLA, he almost got hired at Florida. Like Florida was also courting him at the same time that they ended up hiring Dan Mullen. And obviously, if Chip Kelly had started out the way that he did at UCLA at Florida, he would have been fired probably after 2 seasons, let alone 3, let alone get a chance at a 4th year. So yeah, the lack of exposure or, I don't want to say interest because UCLA has fans. Like I don't want to say that they don't have fans, but just the lack of intensity around that program, I think definitely will help. Yeah.
And it also helps that he got his extension. He's not going into a lame duck year. So I think, there is pressure on Chip Kelly to win. Like you said, like they might have to approach 10 wins for that extension to feel justifiable at the end of the season, especially with an athletic director that didn't hire him. But, I think that there's a situation where the pressure is on him internally, but there's not a ton of outside pressure banging on his door all the time, which I think can help. So that's an important thing to keep in mind with them.
I think that's a great way to end this. I think we're both going over with UCLA at 8.5. Maybe me a little bit more tentatively so than Derek, but I do think there's some value there. But appreciate you guys hanging with us, and we will be back next week.